Could President Trump finally be about to recognise Somaliland? Since taking office in early 2025, there's been growing speculation that he could reverse decades of US policy and accept Somaliland as an independent sovereign state. But while powerful voices support the move, many worry about the broader consequences. In addition to potentially altering the regional dynamics of the Horn of Africa, it could spark far-reaching debates about borders, sovereignty and wider US foreign policy. So why is there growing speculation about this possibility, and could or should it actually happen? Hello and welcome. My name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict and security. While we often believe that recognising new countries is a legal matter governed by rules and principles, in reality it frequently depends on the political decisions of great powers. This is particularly true in contentious situations where a new state lacks full international support. In such cases, the United States can play a critical role. Traditionally, if it recognises a territory, the general view is that others are more likely to follow. For this reason, new countries have often looked to Washington for support. A good example is Somaliland. For over 30 years, it's lobbied for international acceptance without success. While some countries maintain good informal relations with it, including the United States and Britain, they've stopped short of actual recognition. But recently, there's been growing speculation that this could change. Since taking office, reports have suggested that President Trump is actively considering the idea. Somaliland is situated in the Horn of Africa. Djibouti lies to its northwest, Ethiopia to its southwest, and Somalia to the east. To its north is the Gulf of Aden, and Yemen lies beyond that. Located on one of the world's major shipping routes, Somaliland occupies a strategically vital geopolitical position. The population is approximately 6 million. It consists mainly of Sunni Muslim ethnic Somalis, predominantly from the Izak, one of the 5 principal Somali clans. Despite lacking international recognition, Somaliland functions as a de facto state. It has its own government, parliament, constitution, security forces, and even currency, and there are also regular elections. Overall, the territory is regarded as relatively stable, especially in comparison to neighbouring Somalia. And yet, despite more than 30 years of self-declared independent existence, no country officially recognises it. The territory first emerged in the late 19th century when the area fell under British colonial rule, becoming the British Somaliland Protectorate in 1884, as opposed to neighbouring Italian Somaliland to its south and east. This lasted until British decolonisation after the Second World War. On the 26th of June 1960, the state of Somaliland came into existence and was recognised by a number of countries, including the United Kingdom. However, the new state was short-lived. Just days later, the Italian-administered Trust Territory of Somaliland gained its independence, and the two officially merged to form the Somali Republic. Although the union was initially welcomed, problems soon emerged. Political tensions intensified as northern elites felt marginalised by Mogadishu, which swiftly became the centre of power. Over the following decades, resentment in the north gradually deepened. This all reached a peak under the brutal military dictatorship of Mohamed Siad Barre, who governed Somalia from 1969 until 1991. In the 1980s, his forces carried out devastating attacks on the north, destroying infrastructure and killing tens of thousands of civilians. As a result, when Barre's regime collapsed in 1991, Somaliland quickly declared its independence, developing its own institutions and remaining relatively peaceful, even as the rest of Somalia collapsed into civil war and chaos. So, why hasn't Somaliland been recognised? There are, in fact, 2 main reasons. First of all, there's the principle of the territorial integrity of states. Many countries around the world fear setting a precedent for secessionist movements elsewhere, especially in Africa. Indeed, even though an African Union fact-finding mission recognised the unique circumstances surrounding Somaliland's independence, African Union members have been wary of redrawing colonial borders. Secondly, since the early 1990s, countless efforts have been made to rebuild Somalia as a unified state. Recognising Somaliland would effectively accept the permanent partition of the country, something that many other states have been reluctant to do. But while all this has kept Somaliland in diplomatic limbo, in recent years we've seen growing calls for recognition to be considered. This is in turn based on several factors. For a start, there's the argument that Somaliland has demonstrated long-term stability. It's survived for over 30 years wholly independently, developing democratic institutions and remaining relatively peaceful in a turbulent region. Therefore, many argue that it's now earned its statehood. In addition, there's the security factor. Once again, the Gulf of Aden is one of the most significant waterways on Earth. With instability in Yemen, where anti-Western Houthi insurgents control much of the country, Somaliland's strategic position has become increasingly important. Tied to this, the fact that the Somaliland port of Berbera is steadily upgrading its facilities with investment from the United Arab Emirates has only strengthened Somaliland's wider international value. Similarly, there's a broader geopolitical aspect. China has been increasing its regional presence and has even established its first overseas military base in Djibouti, just a few hundred kilometres away, much to Washington's alarm. And it's against this backdrop that there's been growing speculation that the United States under President Trump may now be about to recognise Somaliland. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please do consider giving it a like, sharing it, or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It all really helps. Many thanks, and now back to the video. Talk of recognition first emerged in the months leading up to the 2024 US presidential election as reports suggested that Trump might break with decades of US policy and accept Somaliland's independence. This was also spurred by calls for recognition from some leading Republican figures, including Senator Ted Cruz, who's openly called Somaliland a critical security and diplomatic partner. Such statements, coupled with wider Republican criticism of Beijing's influence in the Horn of Africa, in turn fed rumours that recognition might form a part of Trump's foreign policy agenda. Indeed, since Trump took office in January, reports of imminent recognition have continued. But while all this could be seen as wishful thinking, especially as the State Department has tried to play down the claims, there does in fact appear to be truth to the rumours. When asked about it in August 2025, Trump said that his administration was looking into it, much to the delight of Somaliland officials. And certainly Hargeisa expects this to happen. The Somaliland president has even gone as far as to say that recognition is on the horizon. Not if, but when. And yet, despite all the speculation, there's still been no announcement. While Trump certainly seems to be considering recognition, the decision is far from straightforward. There are compelling arguments on both sides of the debate. Apart from rewarding Somaliland for establishing a functioning democracy and sending a message that stability and security are valued, supporters of the move argue that it would provide the US with a vital strategic and economic partner in the Horn of Africa. Besides opening up Berbera, it would also give the US access to nearby airfields. This could help defend the Gulf of Aden and combat the Houthis in Yemen. It would also counter China's increasing influence over the region. Finally, it could persuade others to follow suit. If the US led the way, the United Kingdom, Ethiopia and the Gulf states could also recognise Somaliland, encouraging yet more to do so. However, balance against this, opponents argue that it would carry significant costs. While US recognition can be crucial in such cases, the notion that it would encourage others to follow suit may be overly optimistic. Many African countries would hesitate to endorse Somaliland's independence, fearing that it could trigger separatist movements elsewhere on the continent. And without African recognition, many other countries elsewhere might not follow. It could also backfire in other ways. Beijing might respond by strengthening its relations with Somalia, possibly providing Mogadishu with even more aid and military support. Likewise, it could complicate relations with key partners. For example, NATO member Turkey has become a close ally of Somalia, establishing a military base in the country. Ankara would strongly oppose any recognition of Somaliland. Finally, there are regional security implications. While it could help in the fight against the Houthi in Yemen, it would destabilise the fragile Somali government in Mogadishu, which still claims sovereignty over Somaliland. As well as struggling to maintain authority, it's fighting to contain its own Islamist insurgency. On top of all this, others argue that Somaliland's democracy and stability aren't as strong as they once were. Indeed, in the last few years, it's even lost control of a significant part of its territory, which has fallen to forces that want to remain part of Somalia. Some would argue that it might be better to reinforce support for Somalia instead. Of course, whether Trump should recognise Somaliland is wholly separate from whether he actually will. Again, opinion is divided. There's certainly little doubt that he's willing to do things that go against international opinion, if not international law. During his first term, he recognised Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights from Syria and Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He also recognised Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara as part of a deal that also saw Morocco recognise Israel. But in these instances, the common link throughout was Israel, a key US ally. While recognising Somaliland could counterbalance China's expanding footprint in the region, it lacks the direct foreign policy significance or domestic value of the other decisions. It would also be unpopular internationally, with no likely benefits at home. In this sense, he may well stop short of full recognition and instead aim to strengthen ties with Somaliland in other ways. For instance, the US could increase its diplomatic presence in Hargeisa. Alternatively, Trump could sign economic, political and even military agreements with Somaliland without formally recognising it as a sovereign state. This approach would allow the US to reap many of the benefits without the drawbacks, even if it would lack the headline-grabbing impact that he so enjoys. But then again, with Trump, one never knows. And it's for all these reasons that excitement certainly seems to be building that the US may be about to take a decisive step with regard to this decades-long issue. The question, of course, is whether, if Trump does recognise Somaliland, any other countries will follow his lead. I hope you found that helpful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.